2023 was a fantastic year for Switch games, more so than I think a lot of people were first expecting going into the year, just because there's been this kind of side conversation of what's going on with Nintendo's next hardware. Is there going to be a Switch 2? When is that coming out? And this assumption that means that, the Switch is going to taper off, and it really hasn't yet. And in fact, when you even look at this upcoming year, while there are certainly some gaps and some more things that could be announced, we already have a lot of stuff to look forward to in 24. So I got together a bunch of the games that I'm most excited for coming out to the Switch. Some of these are exclusive, some of these are multi-plat, first party, third party, indie, whatever. We're just gonna go over all the stuff I'm most excited about. I'm gonna start with the games that we have for sure release dates on and then move on to some of the more ambiguous ones. And while there are a couple great games coming out in the first couple of months, really for me, a lot of things take off starting in March, at least on the Switch. First of which, and I know this is a bit of a weird sell for some people, Unicorn Overlord. When this game was first revealed, I think there was kind of a mixed reception of some people that keep track of Vanillaware and were immediately extremely hyped, myself included, and then other people that maybe don't keep up with Vanillaware games and were a little bit confused by the title and the trailer itself. And honestly, I really don't want people to sleep on this game. There is so much potential for this title. To begin with, Vanillaware's track record as a dev is just phenomenal. Odin Sphere, Dragon's Crown, Muramasa, most recently 13 Sentinels, all high quality games that are excellent. And what makes Unicorn Overlord in particular more exciting for me is that it's not only coming from a studio I like, but it's also a genre that I really enjoy and love, which is a strategy RPG. In particular, one that looks like it takes a lot of cues from the older Ogre Battle games. Since the initial trailer, there have been some bits and pieces of new information dropped over time. We've seen some additional character reveals, a look at a couple more mechanics, most importantly, a lot more food picks, because food in Vanillaware games just always looks incredible. Just trust me, if this is not something you are paying attention to before, keep your eyes on it, because I think it's going to be a fantastic sleeper hit of 24. Later on in that month, on the 22nd, we'll also be getting Princess Peach Showtime. Now, this is one where I think that we are still a little bit relatively light on hard details for, but based on the at least original trailers that Nintendo has shown, there is a lot of promise here. I really like when the Mario franchise, as large as it is, experiments a little more with some of the more interesting one-off games. Obviously, there are side franchises and spin-offs that have been great, but I like seeing more experimentation happen. And in this case, Princess Peach getting the chance to be the lead character over everyone else that we've gotten plenty of games from. She did have a DS release that was also a solid title, but it's nice to see a 3D one now as well. The big theme of this one is playing with everything like it's a stage play, which also gives me flashbacks to Super Mario Bros. 3, one of my absolute favorite games in the franchise. But the big mechanic is that Peach is able to take on different costumes, which give her different abilities, different playstyles, and will be used to navigate your way through a variety of different challenges. We've really only had the first major trailer to go off of for this one. I'm hoping we'll get a little more information before launch in March. There is usually a Nintendo Direct sometime in the early year. This is definitely a title, though, that I'm interested in learning more about. Next up are two games that are both coming out on April 23rd. I promise this whole list is not nothing but RPGs, but both of these are. And I'm gonna start with Aeon Chronicle. Aeon Chronicle is a game that I actually kickstarted a number of years ago. It is a spiritual successor to the Suikoden franchise from Konami. And when I say spiritual successor, it's not just in the sense of, oh, it's a game meant to be in a similar style of and have some of the features of. It's literally being made by some of the devs that worked on Suikoden back in the day. If that's a franchise you're not familiar with, the basic main pitch here is think turn-based party RPG, but with a absolutely massive cast of characters. In the Suikoden games, the goal was to get 108 total. Not all of them were like party members, but still a very large chunk of them would be. And Aeon is looking to actually have an even larger roster than that. Now, I actually got a chance to play an early version of this game a couple weeks ago. As someone who really liked the Suikoden games, Aeon really does feel like it's going to be a proper successor to it. The core gameplay and writing in general just really evokes the vibes right away. And it offers a visual style that to me is basically perfect because it evokes a little bit of PS1 era visuals, but obviously takes it in a much more beautiful direction that was not possible back then. Then also releasing on that same day, the 23rd, is Saga Emerald Beyond. Saga is a franchise that, to be honest, is one that has always been a little bit hit and miss with me. A lot of their games tend to throw you into the deep end right from the start, and sometimes I am infatuated with that and get really into it. In particular, Saga Frontier is probably my absolute favorite one of the series, and it's a game that I still love today. I love that it got a updated remaster that was released on current systems. But then there have been other entries in the franchise where it's just a little bit too much upfront for me. And I'm hoping that Emerald Beyond is going to be tapping in a little bit more to the style that I've personally enjoyed. Regardless of how the actual gameplay is going to end up being, Saga as a franchise is one that I think just absolutely oozes personality and style. I love the character designs in this game. And one of the immediate pitches we have for Emerald Beyond is that we're seeing the initial main cast of characters that can be chosen from to play as your lead characters. And there's already just a lot of intriguing stuff to work with just based on those trailers alone. Again, Saga is a franchise that I think can be very hit or miss. It can be a little overwhelming if you haven't played other games in the series before, but everything we've seen from this one looks really solid this far, and I'm just fingers crossed it's going to be one of those ones that really hits right. Now, as far as games with actual hard release dates go, that's basically it for me. There's a few other games we know of that I am looking forward to that just don't rank quite as high. But aside from those, there are a lot of games that don't have hard confirmed release dates just yet, but are planned for 24 that I'm very excited about. First one up I want to talk about is Mina The Hollower. If you're not familiar with this title at all, it's the next game coming from Yacht Club Games, most popularly known for making the Shovel Knight franchise. And whereas Shovel Knight was very much a love letter to 2D platforming games, Mina is a love letter to top-down action games, particularly evoking a Game Boy Color style visual that at first glance looks a lot like Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, for good reason, but really when you dig a little deeper has a lot of influence from some other titles, very different ones of which included things like Castlevania and even Bloodborne. I actually did get a chance to play a very early version of this game when they first announced it on a Kickstarter, and there was kind of a sample demo that some people got to try out, and I loved that demo so much. I still have the video up on this channel if you want to check it out. It's an upload from a ways back, but it is such a cool looking game that oozes a lot of flavor, and just walks that really nice balance of you can see where it wears those influences from a classic older game, but builds upon it in ways that we haven't fully really seen yet. In particular, the burrowing mechanics and ways you could interact with sub-weapons were super interesting to me, but on top of that, there's also this layer of plot progression that feels a lot like a Soulsborne style game, Bloodborne in particular, that really got me actually extra hooked, because the core gameplay already feels great, but the way that plot progression can also play a role in the game is the stuff that really hooks me. Next is another indie game that I want to highlight, and one that I have gotten a chance to play just a little bit of, which is Anton Blast. I got to check this out at the most recent Day of the Devs, which was a couple weeks back. This was a game that I was vaguely aware of before I got the chance to try the demo, and now that I've actually had some time playing it, I am really excited for the full release version of this game. This is a game that at first glance I think is going to make most people think of Wario Land, but there's some DNA of a couple other games mixed in, including Crash Bandicoot if it were like a 2D style game, and it is just an absolute hectic mess of a 2D platformer, and I mean that in the best way possible. Anton handles like a human wrecking ball, and there's this really delightful balance and sense of impact where it's utter chaos at all times, but as you take the time learning the mechanics, getting a better sense of control and the physics, there's this kind of weird order to the whole thing. The levels that I got a chance to play really showcase this balance of something where you can take your time and work your way through it and kind of more carefully poke and prod it, or once you have a better sense of what you're doing, just absolutely bulldoze your way through everything in an incredibly satisfying way. This is definitely a neat title I was kind of sleeping on before, especially because some of the games that it's influenced by are just ones that have not been my personal thing as much, but now I want to play it a lot more, and I'm really excited for it to come out sometime in 24. Taking a break from indies, I do want to shout out one other first-party Nintendo game that we know about that's coming out sometime next year, which is the Paper Mario ThousandYear Remake. Look, obviously looking at some of the past games on this list, I love RPGs, and as much as I've enjoyed a lot of different Mario franchise games, the ones that I really go back to as my personal favorites are the RPG titles, like the Super Mario RPG Remake we got earlier this year that I also absolutely loved, and the earlier Paper Mario games. ThousandYear Door is one of the most beloved Mario games of this style, and for good reason. I think there's just a wonderful balance here of adding personality to a lot of traditional Mario characters that you don't necessarily see in other entries in the franchise, as well as a core combat mechanic that is, relatively simple compared to some other RPGs out there, but is still extremely satisfying, especially thanks to its timed hit mechanics. One of the potentially really interesting things with this is that we don't actually know to what full scale this game is, simply a remaster or maybe leaning a little bit more in the direction of a remake. Some of the early snippets of gameplay we've seen actually shows things that are a bit more different than what was in the original version of the game. So similar to Super Mario RPG Remake, I think there's some hanging questions of how much of this is going to be one-to-one, which would still be a fantastic game, and maybe what's being added a little bit on top to give it its own fresh feeling and something a bit different. The dream for me here is that we actually get some side content where you get to see Luigi's adventures in the Waffle Kingdom. Probably not going to happen, but I can dream. One of the more interesting games to me coming out, especially because this is a new IP from a dev that I really enjoy, is Deca Police. Level 5 has made some fantastic games for Nintendo Switch systems and has done a little bit of multi-platform as well. And Deca Police is a new game coming from them, looks to be a fusion of visual novel detective story style stuff, kind of like the Ace Attorney games, but mixing that with turn-based party RPG stuff. So basically two of my favorite genres collapsed together into one new game. This was already a game that I was excited about when we first saw trailers for it it because it just looks really interesting to me. But what's really piqued my interest more is that at the most recent Tokyo Game Show, it was basically the big surprise hit game of the floor show. Everyone who got chances to play early versions of it and check it out had nothing but incredibly good things to say. And that was during a year when there was definitely some other games that were tough competition to check out. So that being the one that a lot of people really had nothing but praise to shout out about makes me want to get my hands on the final version all the more. Level 5 has made some great stuff. There's a lot of different things on the horizon they've announced for the Switch upcoming that I'm excited for. We're also getting a new Professor Layton, which I need more information about. But as far as the things that we've seen a little bit more from them lately, Deca Police is the one that has my attention the most. Next up is the Plucky Squire. Now this is one that I've talked about a couple times in the past because I've been really interested in trying it out. It was originally slated for 23 and ended up getting delayed into 24, which I am completely fine with because this game looks beautiful. It has this storybook art style initially where it is a 2D game playing out on a book, but then the character is able to break free and enter a 3D realm that is exploring, well, the actual real world surrounding the book. There's honestly a lot of fine details about this game we don't have just yet, but there is a charm to the visual style and look that very much calls to me. And generally speaking, I think the publisher Devolver Digital just does a great job of picking some great games to help support and give tools available to. And so just going off the track record of who they're working with, I think Plucky Squire is going to be one of those indie games where there's already some eyes on it right now. When it fully releases, it's gonna be a hit. All right, I got one last game I want to talk about. This one's a little more multi-platform, but Switch is absolutely where I plan to end up putting a lot of time into it with, and that's Hades 2. Supergiant Games is one of my absolute favorite devs, period. I've loved everything they've made from Bastion to Transistor, Pyre, and of course, Hades, which released back in 2020 and was my game of the year back then. It's just a title that did such an excellent job of taking the roguelite formula that is sometimes hit and miss for me and handling narrative in it in a way that just was completely natural and hadn't really been done before by other games that I've at least played. And on top of that, the core action gameplay just felt incredibly satisfying to play. Now, I'm not gonna lie, there was a part of me that, with how much I've enjoyed past Supergiant Games titles, I was hoping for maybe not a direct sequel to be their next game. I just want to see what next new idea they might have, but I completely understand why, as successful as Hades was, that it's getting a direct sequel to Hades 2, and I have no doubt that it's going to be another extremely well-polished, wonderful title to play. This is one where I'm actually not 100% certain we're going to see full release this year, but we did have an early access phase with the original Hades, and so I'm hoping we'll see early access happen with Hades 2 as well. I don't trust early access from all devs that I've played, but one of the better experiences I've absolutely had was with Supergiant Games on the first one. So if Hades 2 gets a similar kind of release, or if we do see a full release happen in 24, that is something I'm going to hop on immediately. So those are all the games that I'm most excited for coming out on the Switch. Obviously, I think there's going to be a lot more stuff that gets announced, but this is just what we know of for now. I am planning on doing a similar video talking about everything else coming out. There's a whole lot of stuff that's multi-platform, coming to PlayStation, Xbox, PC. I'll talk about those, so if you don't want to miss out on that video, make sure to subscribe. If you enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up button to let me know, and I will see you guys later.